So this is the Harley that was imported from Australia. So it wouldn't start, it won't go into first gear. Reset the timing, rebuilt the carburettor, redone all the tappets, got it running. It ran okay, yeah, no, I don't think anything untoward with the engine, but I don't know. But there was a horrible background noise, so the gearbox wouldn't go into first gear. We know that there's something wrong with it, so we stripped the gearbox, and it's a bit of a horror story, to tell you the truth. So the horrible noise was, your clutch basket goes on there. That should be a lovely smooth piece of metal, and these bearings should go round and round and round and be round, but when they're flat and see solid, that doesn't really go round and round. That should be a nice tight rolling fit. Obviously it isn't. So the background noise, when I fired it up, there's a constant background noise.
Yeah.
I would say that was almost definitely that, and it must have been a lot worse because the gearbox was filled right up with oil. It should only be, you should be able to just see your oil in there when the bike's standing upright. When you take your plug out, your filler plug.
Where was the oil up to, do you reckon?
About there, probably about there, because it just poured straight out of there when I undid it.
When it's running though, if you've had that much oil, what would...
The trouble with too much oil is it aerates. It forms bubbles in the oil,
yeah.
And then the oil isn't doing what it's supposed to do. It's not lubricating. It's just being thrown around all over the place. There's too much air in the oil. It bubbles up.
Yeah.
So it's not a good thing to overfill engines and gearboxes. So unfortunately, that's had it. I've got to try and bang these bearings out now and have a look and actually see. I mean, if it's locked up solid in there, it's probably done this as well. I would put a new bearing in it as well, a new race they call it. The counter shaft's had it. That's just been where they built it. See the shiny and the dark? You can feel that. If you can feel the difference in the height of the metal, doesn't matter what you do with your needle rollers that fit inside your counter shaft. That goes in there, and it's all needle rollers either end with the correct spacer washers. Doesn't matter what needle rollers you put in there, it'll never be right. It'll just keep juddering around like that.
Yeah.
All of the spacer washers, there's 4 that go in the counter shaft, they're all completely had it. They should be dead flat, like that surface there. Obviously that's the end where it's sat in, where the needle roller's gone in there. So it doesn't matter how much shimming you put in that, it won't work. Simple as that. It needs all the needle rollers. It needs all the shim washers for the counter shaft. The shim washers between second and low gear were all the wrong thickness. There's 2 on there. They were all the wrong thickness. The fingers, or the forks, are bent. That's where it's been rubbing on the gearbox, look. And they're not actually the right shape anymore. See that bottom arm's bent down? So if you put them in there where they should run, see that?
Yeah.
You can actually physically see it. See, it's not a C anymore, it's not round anymore, is it?
No.
It's actually busted. Bent. That one as well. All the time it's like that. You're never ever going to get it in and out of gear properly. You can't reassemble that without doing it. It's had it. So.
And your concern of the engine?
Well, all that worries me is whoever built that, very badly we might add, if they've done that, yes, I got it running, yes, it sounded okay, but it would worry me. We'll have to speak to the customer, but for the sake of a gasket set and a couple of days labour, I'd strip it down and check it all out, and then just, if it's fine, that's good. It's just the cost of a gasket set and a couple of days labour, and reassemble it. But at the state of the gearbox, I would personally be concerned about the engine. Right, the customer said when he rode it for the first time, obviously it wasn't running right, which we knew, but it leaked a lot of oil. he thought out the gearbox. Now the gearbox seal looked quite tight, there was miles too much oil in it, so it doesn't surprise me if some oil came out of it. But that there, that screw is your adjuster for your misting system that goes into the primary chain case.
Yeah.
Now there should be under there, see that's all loose. Yeah, that should be screwed down tight with like a 1 or a 2 thou washer in it.
Yeah.
To stop bleeding oil, too much oil, into the primary chain case. Now that isn't even done up, and there's a dirty great washer underneath it. So that must have been blowing a lot of oil back into the crankcase, which is probably the leak, I would imagine. Fired it up, the oil pressure light goes straight out, and yes, when I'd readjusted the tappets it was a lot quieter, but like I say, that's just starting it up, it's not riding it. It's up to the customer totally, but if it were mine, I'd strip the engine for the sake of a gasket set and have a look. I mean, if it's a horror story, then he's going to have to phone the guy who got it off and just, you know, have a word with him or whatever. But that, the gearbox is this. I've never seen one lock up like that. And see where I mean, that's just literally worn the bearings flat from there to about there. So that's, I don't think that's ever been rotating. They probably fired it up bone dry or something, and it's just seized itself up or something horrible. I don't know. But if we take those bearings out of there now, we'll have a look and see if it's done a horror story on the race. Right, your needle rollers, when you assemble these, you put a big load of grease around it and you push them in, and the grease holds them in while you feed in your third gear clutch. So we're going to try and get it out. You shouldn't have to hammer bearings out like that. Okay, they should be loose now. Yeah. But the trouble is, you'll never ever get it right, because once that's at it, and best will in the world, you'd like to think that race is okay, but I doubt it very much once it's dug in like that. Can't feel anything, but that doesn't mean anything, you know what I mean? I'd be very wary of putting, well, you can't put that back in, that's had it. All that, see that, all that brindling on there? All that will do is, if you put new bearings in that, hope and pray that that's okay, it will just lock up again.
And back to square one again.
Yeah, so I mean, that's how much. That should look like that. It's just completely had it. So let's get one out of there that was okay and have a measure up and see if they are actually the right bearings to start with. AL 615 by 125. 615. Well, the right length. 125. Tight fit on 125, but that's okay. So they've either fired it up bone dry and it's just caught and smudged itself, and that's the end of that, or they've put, more than likely, that was probably knackered anyway.
Yeah. And
they just put that in there and hope that it will work.
Yeah.
I think that was probably knackered anyway. I don't think Aaron's ridden it for very long at all. It will take a little while to do that. So I think they've put new, or not even put new bearings in, they put bearings in it, got that in it, and probably started it up bone dry with this being knackered anyway, and it's just chewed itself to death.
How quickly would it do that?
Well, pretty quick once it's all locked up, because that, all the time the engine's running, it's not a gearbox.
No.
That's rotating all the time the engine's running. So
are we talking about minutes, or are we talking about?
It won't take very long once it's locked up. Once it's physically locked those bearings up, it won't. When you think about them, they're case hardened, chrome plated, which is chromed seriously hard.
Yeah.
You chew through one like that with that going round, it's
Yeah.
so that's probably, even though it's marked, it's probably oval, bent, because it must have got red hot. So that's a throw it away job, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So how would you remove the race?
Oh, you'll have to heat all the casing up, put it on the press and just push it out. You have to take that second gear alignment bracket out. Literally heat the casing up all the way around here. It's not actually in an awful lot of material. Take that stud out of there so you can put the gearbox flat on your press plate, and then just push him out, and then flip it up the other way and push it back in. But that's, unfortunately, it's the worst one I've seen, to be honest with you. I've seen some pretty bad gearboxes, but that's takes the biscuit, that one.
And I have to ask, what's this weight stand you've got going on here?
It's my new patented gearbox holder. I got fed up with clamping it in a vice and damaging the threads and having to recut them and everything, so I've made that. It's an old faceplate off a lathe.
Okay.
Which they've welded a tube on because it came on this machine here. So that tube went into there with the faceplate on, and if you're welding something rotary,
Yeah.
that's the electric motor, you put your foot on it and it turns that very, very slowly. So you don't have to pull your welder around. You just keep your welder on your hand there, constant, put your foot on the switch, rotates, and you just feed your rod in as you're going round. So I've got a bit of angle and just made a little holder for the gearboxes, just to make like it's leaning a bit that way, so when it comes apart I'll give it a bash with a hammer and straighten it out a bit. But it's a lot easier than having it in there.
Yeah, it's very good.
After all the bloody gearboxes I've done, you'd thought I'd have done it years ago, wouldn't you? 1, 2, 3. That's where the bearings have dug into it. You can't feel it. Yeah, it's had it. See, it's all the way around. So they might have even put the wrong size bearings in it and hammered that thing, you know, the third gear clutch into it.
Yeah.
For them to be that tight in there, but once they're smudged round, and I mean, to wear a flat on one of them, you got to go some.
Yeah.
You really have got to go some. And when you're assembling something like that, if it's too tight, you don't put it together. You know, that's just general sort of engineering practice, isn't it? If it won't go in the hole, you don't smash it in with a hammer. There's something wrong.
You seem a little bit irritated by it.
Yeah, it annoys me that you can manage to f something up that much and put it back together and sell it to somebody and expect it to work, because it ain't going to work. It just winds me up.